Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Ash Owen, and I cannot wait to find moments of joy with you today. If you don't already, why don't you head over to @EverydayJoyPod over on Instagram, and you can catch up on some of the latest bits and pieces. You get to stay up to date, and you get to see some fun little snippets of myself and our guests. So why don't you get ready to dive into today's words to live by.
Don't be timid. Don't get discouraged. God, your God, is with you every step you take. Joshua 1 verse 9 from the Message Bible.
Jack, love chatting with you.
Oh, Ash, it's been a great week.
I've been loving. I know I mentioned it all yesterday's episode, but if you haven't listened to Monday and Tuesday's episodes, go back and listen. We talk about this whole concept of the gap in our expectation, the gap in trust, all of these things that can lead us to either having a great day or a terrible day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that concept was fairly new to me as well. Heard it on a podcast. I think it's actually going to become a bit of a life mantra.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's so crazy how that one thought can alter the way you deal with relationships and all of these things. And that's, I love podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
Love them so much. So if you're not already following us, why don't you give us a follow? Make sure that you're following us. Make sure that you give us a review. It means that people can find out about our podcast and, find out about Jackie's genius thoughts like the trust gap.
Hop on the Facebook group as well. It's awesome there.
It's so much fun. I love hearing everyone's thoughts. Now, this verse, don't be timid. Don't get discouraged. God, your God, will be with you every step that you take. I love this verse.
Oh, it's just we've got the verses like what we've talked about before that are the reset ones that help you remember how you actually should be behaving. Mm-hmm. This is one of those ones that is just like the comfort verse where God's holding you in the palm of his hand, where his wings are overshadowing you and protecting you. This is one of those ones where it's just like, hey, I got you, babe.
Totally.
You're with me and we're all good.
I think something that I've come to really realize, and what this verse kind of tells me, is whether it's Joshua, whether it is Timothy, whoever it is, a lot of these Bible characters, I don't like saying characters because they're people, but these Bible stories, they all had a level of insecurity or a level of doubt in what they could do, and even probably to an extent a level of doubt in God, have you actually asked me to do this? Have you actually called me to do this? Yeah. And so it's so interesting that you get verses like this in Joshua and Timothy and all these moments of being it's almost like you can see Joshua being okay, God, I'm not going to be discouraged. Right. I'm going to trust you. And I know that you're with me every step. It's almost like this thing of going, oh no, we need to remind ourselves, like you said, Jack, God is with us. Yeah. When things happen, we don't need to be timid. We don't need to be afraid. I think that, and I know, and I've seen in my life, one of the greatest ploys of the enemy is intimidation and fear. Yeah. And I know for me, the times that I've wanted to step away from doing things, the times that I've wanted to just kind of shrink back and not do things I know God's called me to do, has always been from a place of intimidation or a place of going, God, I just don't know if you're with me in this, you know?
And it's like it says, the Bible says many times, don't be afraid. Yeah. Be courageous.
Isn't there this thing where doesn't the Bible say don't be afraid or don't fear 365 times?
Yeah.
I remember growing up in church. Yeah. It was the Bible gives you one for every day. But it's true. I kind of go, it's so easy to be discouraged. It's so easy to be afraid, even just with the climate of the world right now. I found myself going into a spiral recently of fear and stress and worry just with everything going on in the world. And I think to go, okay, no, God, you are with me. Mm-hmm. I trust that you're with me. Yeah. And I'm going to make sure that I am not timid or discouraged when things get rough, because I know, like, it's almost this, I almost have this internal battle being like, I don't want the enemy to like win in this scenario. Like, I don't want the enemy to be like, got her. Like, I want to be like, no, I'm not timid. I'm not afraid because I know who God is and I know that he's protecting me and looking after me. And I think that's what this verse is saying about who God is. He's saying, I am with you. Like I am by your side, and that's why you don't need to be timid. That's why you don't need to be discouraged. Because when you know who God is, it's harder to have those moments.
Yeah. And even when you don't realize it, God is with you.
Yeah.
Like, he is holding your hand. He's there. I mean, it's like the classic old footprints.
Oh, yeah. We've mentioned that on the podcast before. The Footprints poem, one of my favorites, mostly because it articulates this perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. I was there. I thought I was all by myself. And no, that was actually, God was there. He was carrying me.
Yeah.
And I think back, this for me is, I didn't grow up in church. I didn't, have this amazing like knowledge of God until I was, in my mid-30s. And in my early 20s, I did a lot of traveling around the world. I lived in, a different country. I was by myself. I did stupid things. And, looking back on that, I can actually see how God was with me every step of the way.
Yeah.
Like, I remember having one moment, and I look back at it now and I'm like, if one of my kids did this, I would slap them over the head.
You'd be like, absolutely not.
I would slap them over the head and say, what the heck were you thinking? Duh. Like, don't be so stupid. Like, I went traveling on a whim. I was, I was working on a Greek island for the summer. On a whim, I went to Turkey with a friend just for overnight, and then thought, hey, I've never been to Turkey before. I'm just going to stay and go traveling. I had a day pack, 2 sundresses, a bikini, and my toothbrush. And I thought, oh, yeah, great. I'll go backpacking around Turkey for a couple of weeks.
I don't think my stress levels would allow me to do that. But that's
no,
fine.
like my adventure levels definitely encouraged that. But then, 2 weeks later, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going back to this, the island where I was living. I'd been out into, the middle of Turkey, kind of the eastern side of Turkey to the, in this beautiful area where it's full of caves and, all sorts of things. It was such an adventure. And I was like, what's the quickest way I can get back to this port? And it was an overnight bus trip. So from eastern Turkey to the coast, it was... I can't remember exactly. I want to say it was over 12 hours.
Yeah, wow.
I hop on this bus at night time. Not only am I the only female on this bus, I am very white, very blonde.
I was about to say...
very young.
I was about to say just this blonde gal sitting on this.
Right? Sitting on a bus, going overnight through the middle of Turkey with all these Turkish blokes. And... I look back now and I'm like, yep, God, you were with me.
Totally.
You were definitely there. You were my protection. You were my comfort, because I had no idea at the time that I had put myself in this stupid situation. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
But he was there.
Yeah.
I wasn't being timid, that's for sure. But, God was definitely walking alongside me in my stupidity. Yeah.
It's like with hindsight. And I think that most people who have a faith, even though maybe there's been seasons where they've been like, man, God, where were you in that time? Like, I couldn't hear your voice, or you felt far. With hindsight,
oh, he was there.
We all go, oh man, like, God, you were in this.
Yeah.
Like even reflecting on my life as a whole, it's
right.
like every decision, every good thing, every bad thing literally has led me to this point.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this thing of a lot of that I wouldn't have done on my own, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, if God wasn't allowing things to happen to me or growing me or pushing me or whatever it was.
Yeah.
In the moment, it might feel terrible. In the moment, it might feel like the most confusing thing. But when you actually go, like, God, you're with me every step of the way. And I think something, I don't know, I literally think it's from Oceans, classic Christian Oceans, it's like, you've never failed and you won't start now, is like the lyrics. Yeah. And I think that is so true to this verse. And I think that's what this verse is encapsulating, is like, when you look back at your life, when you know that God has been with you every step of the way, he's never failed us. and he won't start now. So we don't need to be timid.
Yeah.
We don't need to be discouraged. And I'm not saying, like we said in the episode yesterday, doesn't mean we're hyper positive and never acknowledge the fact that things are tough. But it's going, God, in the tough, I know that you're here. In the difficult, I know that you're good. And I think that if I hadn't gone through tough seasons of life, I don't think I would have the same level of trust. It's like what we're talking about in the gap.
Yeah.
The crazy thing with my relationship with God is that gap is so full of trust.
Right.
Because he's been so faithful even when it's been difficult.
Yeah.
And even when it's been weeks of struggling and those prayers not being answered or whatever it is, in the long term, God has been so faithful. So that gap of expectation is filled with so much trust, so much love and understanding that God will get me through it,
So
that
good,
he is
Ash.
walking with
Yeah,
me,
so
and that we
good.
don't need to fear. And I think that's what today is about. And so if you're dealing with fear today, if you're worried about the steps that you're taking, whether it's your career, whether it's your family, whether it's a relationship, whatever it is, God is with you. Don't be discouraged. Don't be timid. Know that God is with you. And remember that that gap of expectation with the Lord is trust and joy and love. And we can rely on him wholeheartedly. Cannot wait to dive even deeper into the Word of God with you tomorrow. But until then, I pray you find moments of joy.